10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress, and you might have noticed we did switch our times out today. It is lunchtime today in California, and also it's Wednesday, and I am stepping in for the irreplaceable Don Wibier along with Gregory Navasarkian. Hey Gregory, how are you?
Doing well. How about you, Amanda?
I'm good. So for me, who hasn't been on this live stream, and for anyone that might be new, can you sort of recap what you've been doing and where you're going today?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay.
So, over the last number of weeks, we've been building out this DX Cloud mock, web hosting platform slash virtual machine slash cloud storage thing, and I just kind of worked on this cloud storage page here last week. And if everyone remembers, I added these two gauges on the page where when we click on different elements in this grid down here, the gauges will automatically change.
Cool.
And so today what we're going to be doing is working on this virtual machines page. It's going to be very similar to this. However, there's some important changes and some techniques that I haven't really showed in the past. So hopefully everyone is interested to see that. And before we get started with that, I thought I would mention once again that this project is on GitHub. So that should be in the video description. So if you want to download the code and run it yourself, you're welcome to. And so yeah, so the first thing we need to just take a quick look at is the master detail view of our DevExtreme data grid. And right now I'm in the demo section of our website under data grid and master detail. And as we can see, what the master detail is simply this expandable row. And we can see these different options we have. And so we basically provide a few different ideas of how it can be done. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing as virtual machines. Plus, we're going to be doing a couple other fun things. So let's go ahead and get started and get writing this web app out. So what I need to do first of all is come into my pages here and create a new page. And I'm going to call this dashboard virtual machines .tsx, and I'll open this up. And I'm going to go ahead and create this function really quick. And down here,
Hey Gregory, virtual is misspelled in that up top.
yep, thanks.
Yeah, it's about all I can help with.
Okay. So let's just really quickly add that to our routing here. And again, I'm using React Router DOM for this routing. So we'll close out this tag. And I put the curly brace in the wrong place. And there we go. So now let's jump back and make sure that it's working. Yep. So the page is working. So now we can go back to our code. And I'm going to add a few imports at the top. So I'm going to first import our data grid, our master detail component, our column component, and sorting from DevExtreme React / data grid. So after that, I'm going to import our DevExtreme button as well. And that's it for that for now. So in our return here, I'm going to add a div. Open that up. And inside here, I'm going to add our h1 tag. And I'm going to add a class name of margin-4. And I'm just going to say virtual machines. And below that, I'm going to add this horizontal rule that we've been adding to these pages with a class name of h-1, so height-1. So it's going to be a slightly thicker line than if we didn't have this. Margin-4, background-gray-700, border-0, and rounded. And if we jump back, we have that horizontal rule across the top here. So now what I'm going to add is another div. With a class name of margin in the x direction of 4 for medium screens, mx-12 and p-8. And we'll open that up. And inside here, the first thing I'm going to add is a button. And for this button, we just want to have that same kind of, create new button. So I'm going to give it an icon of plus. And again, these are our DevExtreme icons. And you can find that in our docs. We have an entire list of them and all what they look like and all that. And for the text, I'm going to say add VM. For the styling mode, I'm going to say contained. And the type, I'm just going to say default. And let's just make sure that it's rendering, and it is. So now what I'm going to do is add an on-click event to this, so it theoretically will take us to the create a new virtual machine page, which of course I haven't created yet, but we will get to these pages eventually, hopefully. And so I'm just going to say navigate to dashboard / virtual machine / add. And of course, we need to add our use navigate hook. And we need to import this. So I'll just do that really quickly. And we're going to give this button a class name of margin bottom -2. And let's jump back, and it's still working. It's still there. And make sure when I click it, it works. And it takes us to the add page, which, like I said, we haven't created. But
Nice.
yeah, so pretty simple. So now what we need to do is start working on our data grid. So I am going to copy some of this data over because like I've been saying, this is not connected to a backend, just so we can, show everyone what it looks like without having to run a backend all the time or force you to run it. So I'm just going to hard code these things in here. Yeah, so now what I'm going to go ahead and do under this button is I'm just going to add our data grid. And in here, I'm going to say key expression is ID. So this ID here will correspond to the ID in our list here. Theoretically, when you get your data back from your backend, you'd have it, an ID along with it. So that's what we're going to be using to reference the data in each row of the grid. The data source is going to be that data array that I just created. I'm going to set the show borders property to true. And I'm going to say focus row enabled is also true. So if we jump back, we can see we have our grid on the screen.
Wow.
And when I click, we have our rows focused. And I'm just doing this just so it looks a little bit better when we click on things. It doesn't make that much of a difference. So what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm just going to set up a couple things in here. So I'm going to set up our sorting. I'm going to set the single. Basically what it means is we can only sort one row at a time. So if I click on another row, it doesn't sort two at a time. I just prefer it for simplicity.
Yeah.
And down here, we're just going to start, putting in our columns. So I'm going to specify these individually because I might not want something to show up, or I might want to have something customized, that kind of thing. So I'm going to say column data field equals ID, and I'm going to say visible is equal to false. That way our ID column won't show up because we don't want to see that. Most likely what it would be is, some crazy random number, and we wouldn't want the user to see that. I'm going to set this name and give it a caption of name that's capitalized. And I'm going to say give status as well. And I will go ahead and do the type. Oops. And I'll just copy and paste this quickly so we don't have to watch me type all the time. Okay, and there's going to be one more. Actually, no, that's it. Sorry. So let's jump back, and now we can see that the ID column here is gone. But everything else is still working. And so now what we're going to do is start working on our master detail. So what we need to do is create a new file. And I'm going to do it here in this components/dashboard folder. And I'm going to call this virtual machines grid detail. Again, I apologize for my poor naming conventions, but it's okay. So I'm going to say import use state and use effect from React. I'm going to import the data grid types from DevExtreme React / data grid. And I'm going to import a circular gauge scale label title and font from DevExtreme React / circular gauge. And I'm just going to go ahead and create this function. And we'll export this function. And of course, what we're going to need is we're going to need to pass this props so we can actually see the data that we pass into it, so we can see it in our gauge. So I'm going to say props with a type of data grid types dot master detail template data. So it's a bit of a long type, but that's the correct convention for our data grid master detail. So now that we've created this, I'm going to jump back and import it into this original page file. And then save virtual machines master detail. And this looks to me like it's correct. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the master detail component. I'm going to say enabled is true, and the render is going to be this virtual machines grid detail component. And if we go back, we should see next to each row we have this small arrow. And when we click it, we don't see anything because, of course, it's empty right now.
Right, but if you filled that in, that would be dropping down.
Yeah, and it will in a second as I fill it in. So,
Cool.
yeah, so now I'm going to jump back here. And first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a p tag in here. I'm going to give it a class name of text-2xl. And inside here, I'm going to say props.data.name. And I'm just going to give just going to write out a pipe here and say props.data.status. And before we take a look at that, I'm going to add some classes to this div. I'm going to say padding-2, flex, and flex-column. And if we update this, we can see it says this node 1 and online. So this is just passing in this data, and then I'm just going to print it out here for now, just so we can check and make sure it's working, which it is. And down here, I'm going to add another div. Open this up. And again, add some more CSS to it. And in here, I'm going to say flex-row, and justify center. And this is just so our gauges are going to be nice and centered. So what I decided to do is create some gauges that essentially mimic having, let's say, a CPU, memory, and storage usage gauges. So a lot of times in these kinds of hosting platforms, you can see kind of an overview and status of the VM instance that you have. So I'm going to try to mimic that. And what I'm going to do is try to make it so it's kind of like a live sort of gauge, as if it would be, if this was real and it was getting real-time updates. So the way I'm going to do that is just by, generating some random data using a useEffect hook here. So first I have to create some state variables to hold this stuff. So first I'm going to say const CPU, and set CPU is equal to use state of 0. And again, with TypeScript, we could add a type here. So now I'm also say memory and set memory. And I'm going to say storage and set storage. So we have these 3 state variables here. And now what I'm going to do is say useEffect, add our function in here, add our dependency array, which I'm going to leave empty. Open up the function body here. And I'm going to say const interval equals set interval. And this is going to take another function as well. I'll open that up and say set CPU is math.floor math.random times 100. Okay. And set memory. I'm actually just going to copy this. And storage is going to be the same. So what we're doing here is basically we're going to set up an interval. So every 5 seconds or 5,000 milliseconds, it'll run inside this use effect. And the reason why I'm creating this interval function inside this use effect is so it doesn't run sort of in a odd way where it sort of compounds on itself, and it can cause us just some weird performance issues. If this was something more serious going on, of course, just the simple math calculation is no problem, and it can be done millions of times a second without any issue. But I just did this just so we can sort of clean up any memory issues. So what I'm going to do is say return clear interval, and then pass in this interval function. So essentially when this page renders, it'll run this interval, it'll set these state variables, and it'll modify it every 5 seconds. And when we leave, it'll go ahead and clean it out. So we won't have any excess memory that's being used once we leave the page, just in case. Most likely it will take care of itself, but this is just good practice.
Okay.
So now, first of all, let me go ahead and make sure that this is working. So I'm just going to try it out. So I'm going to say CPU memory and storage, just like this. So now if I refresh, we can see down here we have these 3 zeros. And if we just give it a second, it'll start, populating with different numbers. So every 5 seconds, it should change, which it is. And if I open up another one, we'll go ahead and wait 5 seconds. Of course, if we were, sending a request to a server, it would give us immediate responses rather than having to wait 5 seconds. But I decided to have just a bit of a timer in between. We could also make it so we have like a refresh button, but I thought this is just better and easier because I, for one, hate having to hit refresh, when I'm,
I
say,
do
like,
too.
browsing something, it just gets
I
annoying.
just want it to update.
Yeah, exactly. So this is all working fine. So we can go ahead and just get rid of that. And I'm going to create this circular gauge. And I'm going to give it a value of CPU. And it's not self-closing. And inside here, I'm going to give it a scale of start value is equal to 0, just because I want our scale to, start at 0 and end at 100. And I'm going to give it a tick interval of 5. And inside the scale tag, I'm going to give it a label with use range colors is true. And under this scale, I'm going to create a title. And the text is going to be CPU, just a %. Except I have to put into quotes. And inside the title, I'm going to give it a font with a size of 20 and a color of white. So let's go ahead and make sure this is working. So I'll refresh this page. Sometimes we still have to refresh.
Oh,
And
there it is.
yeah. And so if we give it a second, we'll see that it's changing. And because it's a random number, it's going to change rather drastically. But we can see how it's changing. It has that cool animation that we talked about last week, how everything, you know, looks pretty nice. And, we have this title. Just like we mentioned last week, we can also export these. So we can export these individually. I decided not to put that because I thought it would look kind of dumb with a little, hamburger menu next to each one of these. But we could still do that if we wanted to. And we create another gauge down here. And actually, I'm just going to copy and paste this twice. And I'm just going to leave it like this. And I'm going to just change some of the names here. And so it'll be nice and fast for us. So that's interesting. Looks like I accidentally messed something up. I think we were missing a div there. And okay, that looks right. So if we go back to our page here, we'll close down this menu. We should see all three of these gauges. And we could see how they're, moving and changing. And I'll open up one more of these.
This might be a silly question, but when you said you could export them out, what would you need? Like, what kind of usage would that be for? Like, why would you export that gauge?
So what I would say is, I'll just go ahead and do the export really quick so we can see how it looks. So if I just add the export, say to this one here, I refresh, and I have to enable the export. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I'm taking you off the taking you down the different path.
No, it's fine. So we can see we have this hamburger menu. So we have these various options. So for example, if I hit print and we just wait for it to figure out whatever it's doing, we can see we get this gauge in here. It's really more useful for charts, like this chart I have on this dashboard page, where if we hit it, we can see how this chart looks. As part of a web app like this, what's nice about this is what someone can do theoretically is they could take this information to like this, as an SVG file, and they can send it to someone else, like in an email or something like that, like in a rich text document, or put into a PDF or whatever it is. So they can embed this image in some kind of report. so they can see the charting information. But if I jump back here to our demos, a good example of that would be something like this chart, where it's much more complicated. And if we want to export this, it's going to be a lot more useful. And of course, a lot of these charts, we have, I mean, we have lots of different charts here. Like for example, we have this spline chart, which is all, these crazy lines and
Yeah.
everything. So we have like lots of options here. And the way I see it is, um, in a business setting, people, let's say the higher ups generally love charts. So the more charts you can add, the better.
I got some
So
charts.
yeah,
Oh yeah, look at that. Yep.
yeah. So we can get like
Candlestick.
like this candlestick, like stock kind of chart. So that's kind of cool.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah. So I mean, it's pretty cool. I'll go ahead and get rid of that export, just so we don't see it there anymore, and I'll delete it from our imports up here, so we don't get any error messages. And that more or less wraps up this grid detail. So, like I said, we, have it so it changes every 5 seconds, and we can see how these animations are. If you want to see more about those gauges, we can jump here into our gauges overview. And this is actually kind of like a car gauge look. So that's kind of cool. But I've used the circular gauge here. And we could see a number of different options for the circular gauge in here under circular gauge. These are just some of our other gauge options, where we have this bar gauge as well. And we could see we have different color palettes for these gauges. And we can actually try this out really quick. So this range container here, what I could do is I can import that. So I'm going to go ahead and import that range container. And also I need to import range. And just under this scale, I'm going to say range container and give it a palette of pastel. And inside here, I'm just going to give it a range with a start value of 0 and an end value of, let's say, 80. Just in case we want to make it so, let's say we have a certain limit and we want to make sure that the user is aware of that or something like that, just so it stands out. And I'm going to set this range here to 80 to 100. And if we go back and refresh, we should see how this one chart has that different color scheme, where we have this 80 to 100 as this kind of like light yellow and the rest of it is green. We can, of course, also specify the colors ourselves. This is just one of our default color palettes, the pastel color palette. for example, and this is also just really cool in our demos. So if I just change this to office and I hit apply, we should see the color palette change, live in our demo.
Wow.
So we can just test things out just like that. And I'll go ahead and change that to office here as well. And we'll take a look at that, see the difference after I refresh. And we have this kind of different look, just so it's just different color scheme really.
Yeah.
And I can go ahead and add those colors to all of these gauges. And if I refresh, we can see the colors for all of them. So this is just a little formatting thing we could do. Also, what we could do with these gauges is change the indicators. So for example, we have this is kind of the stock default. We have this one, which is like a split indicator, more of a pointy one, and kind of a bar indicator down here. So that's just another option. We also have just like this label. We could have different divisions, so we can have it kind of like a clock hands right here. Just lots of different options with our different gauges.
Yeah.
And I just thought I'd mention this because the gauges are kind of one of those little like unsung kind of controls that we have. And I was just really happy to find a use for them because sometimes there's not really that many uses for a gauge. Most of the time values are static. In I would probably say like over 80% of apps, you're going to get data back from the server, and that's just what it's going to be. Say it's going to be like customer data or something, and it's not going to really change. And cases like this where we were actually managing things like a virtual machine node, we want to see this data in real time, so that's always nice. So looks like we have like 20 minutes left. So I'll go ahead and get started on this.
We got a comment on YouTube from Sri. Nice setup of NVIM for React.
Yeah. So, so for NeoVim here, if anyone's curious, I do have a somewhat custom config for it. The base of it that I'm using is AstroVim, and I just added some customization, some different plugins myself. If you are curious about it, you can email me, and my email will pop up in the chat. So if you want, you can ask me about it. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to editors and fonts and themes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know if I doubt you've ever seen NeoVim, Amanda, but
No.
yeah, my editor here. So for example, if you notice how I'm going up and down here,
Yeah.
I'm pressing the J and K keys on the keyboard. And if I want to go
Okay.
back, it's H and L to go back and forward. And if I want to type something in, I have to either hit a few different keys to actually type stuff in. And if I hit escape, it takes me back out, and I could highlight things like that. Hit space, have some more options.
Huh.
But anyway, just a little fun little thing. And if I hit space O, I can jump into our file tree here, and I can add a new file. I'll dashboard. What was it? Storage? No, it was web hosting. dashboard web hosting .tsx. Call it dashboard web hosting again, of course. Make our arrow function here. Add our return, open it up, add our div. And add this dashboard web hosting here. So if we jump back to our app, we can import this. And it automatically does it for us. Also, I'm using the TS server LSP. That's how, it's doing all these imports and getting all the autocomplete in there. And we'll go ahead and add that path. And it works. So that is pretty much all of these pages taken care of, except the support page, which the support page, I actually have something really cool planned. It's sadly going to be quite a bit of a effort, so I can't really do it today. Hopefully I can get to it. I actually won't be able to be here next week, sadly. But the week after, I don't know about the week after. We'll have to see. I can do it. The
We're
problem
having we got some scheduling issues, but we'll be back.
Yeah, eventually.
Eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely in 2 weeks
for our scheduling.
I'll be back.
Can you do a scheduling?
Yeah. Luckily I already did one. I used our scheduler.
Nice.
So let's see, where is that? Here is our scheduler. So yeah, so we have these schedulers and stuff.
John and Sandra.
Yeah. All of our ancient data. I made a promise when I started doing these streams to never use the Northwind database.
Oh my God. The number of times I have said Northwind database.
Yeah. I remember seeing videos from over a decade ago of you saying that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Northwind database is sort of Microsoft's basic database that's,
right.
Sample data, and it just, it's massive. So people, love using it. Same with the Chinook one that Don's used before. And,
right.
It's hard to come up with sample data. If you can see here, look how creative I've been. Node 1, Node 2, Node 3. That's some real creativity there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Off the charts.
Yeah. Anyway, so that more or less wraps it up for today.
That wraps it up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's awesome. I want to be on the Wednesday live stream. I'm gonna have to fight it out with Don.
It's the best stream. I mean, it's
see who wins in that matchup. All right. So, like we mentioned, we will be back on probably, I think, March 13th, Gregory, is when we'll be back for that support page. So
yeah,
keep an eye out. Okay, everybody. So if you haven't followed us, you can do that. You can also turn on your notifications so that you know whenever we go live. And that is it for this one. Until next time, bye.